we do have a global presence. We just launched our Area to Go app around here, so that's really exciting. I hope you guys enjoy it. And I'm also a mentor at the Teal Foundation 2020 group. And before that, I was a consultant for early-stage startups. I worked at a financial analytics company over in New York, and I've been in different markets from finance to advertising technology to healthcare technology. And now I'm in travel, and it's really great. So Expedia, the mobile app, right now, as of this year, we've had about 70 million shoppers and around 40 million downloads, and that's for iOS and Android. Good numbers, we're excited about that. Really nice growth here in the Asia area as well. And if you're not familiar with our app, this is my itinerary for the trip that I'm on right now. We focus on design first, beautiful, clean, and very action-oriented aesthetic. We try to give you contextual information when you want it and where you want it. So you'll see, and I'll get into the details later on, but bringing you the information at the right time is what we're all about. The takeaways that I'm going to hope that you guys get out of this conversation are how to manage consumer internet products, specifically mobile, and how to get your idea to market, importance of design in getting your idea to market, and building a mobile app, and then creating a robust product, making sure that all the components are there to accomplish what you want from a mobile app. But first, I'd like to talk about what a product manager is not. A product manager is not reactionary. They don't run around and just try to put out fires all the time. They don't add last minute features. They don't micromanage and make sure that people do exactly what they say at every moment. They give them space. They're not overly focused on how. They are not passive, which would mean lacking vision or indecisive prioritization of roadmap, of MVP, of features, anything like that. Not a dictator. What that means, you don't stand on top and just yell at everybody to do things exactly like you want. There's another way to do it. There's a better way to do it than that. You're not distracted. There are a lot of things going on in the product management world and the mobile app team. Everybody needs to talk to you. Everybody needs a certain piece of your attention, and you need to learn to focus that and not get distracted as you try to get everybody what they need. And you don't get confused easily. You need to be able to deconstruct issues so everybody has a clear understanding of what needs to happen and why it needs to happen and how it needs to happen. So now let's talk about a little what a product manager is. They have a deep knowledge of the market, the capabilities, and the competition, so they understand everything from what other people are doing to what you're doing and what they want to be doing. A good product manager executes. They prepare, they ship, they anticipate what's going to come up, whether it's legal implications for a new feature that you're launching, or the marketing needs for any type of localization that you might have come up. You're precise. You're able to clearly and crisply dictate what needs to happen and when and how. This goes back to not a dictator. A good product manager understands that you influence the group and the team, but you don't force them to do specific things. There are a lot of nuances in product management, and understanding that people Everyone has a specific role in the app development, and being able to influence their decision-making process and understand that they have their specialties and let them do their work. That's a really important aspect. And then the product manager understands, clearly define the goals and the success metrics. There's a lot in here about success metrics, and it's a really important aspect of what a product manager is. Another way to put it is a good product manager deeply understands every aspect of the product. They balance all internal and external influences. That could be speaking with customers. That could be, I think of them as travelers for the mobile app for Expedia. But talking to the customers, talking to the legal teams, talking to the API teams, talking to the engineering teams, everything. Good product manager sets a clearly prioritized strategy. You need to understand, like the back of your hand, what needs to be built in the next 6 months, in the next 6 weeks, and even possibly in the next year or so, depending on what type of company that you have. In a startup, it's a little different because anything beyond 6 months is a little unrealistic, so you need to be nimble enough to change that roadmap very quickly as well. And then again, crisply communicates the plan to each group. Everybody has their tasks. Everybody is held accountable for getting their work done, and you need to tell them exactly why they need to be doing something so they can go and do their job. And most of all, a product manager ships. No matter what, you make sure that you get the product out the door at the right time or on as much time as possible. Yes, there are slips. Every time something will come up, and so every once in a while you have to push the date. That's natural. It makes sense. And you'll learn to kind of mitigate that over time. And as I was looking through and building this presentation, I found a really nice excerpt from Ben Horowitz, and kind of talks about good PM, bad PM again. So this is just a quick little phrase from him, and this is a longer excerpt that I encourage you guys to look at. But good product managers know the market, they know the product line, and the competition extremely well, and operate from a strong basis of knowledge and confidence. A good product manager is the CEO of a product. And I really love that line, CEO of a product, because you own the product. You need to make sure that the engineering team has what they need. You need to make sure that the marketing team and the designers have what they need to ship the right thing on time. And speaking of the different teams, I'd like to kind of spend a moment and talk about the different organizational structures. So I have it broken into 3 components, and there are many more that I'll get to in a moment. But in the app and product design world, there's design, there's management, and there's development. And I've seen over the years that sometimes design will be within management and within the product. Sometimes it'll be outside. What the most important thing to consider with this is that wherever the design team is, it needs to have a clear leader. It needs to have someone that can make that final call on whether or not the design is ready to be shipped and built or not. So if it sits within the product team, then you still need to have a clear manager or director of design that is held accountable and can make those final calls. Then the development team, that's who does all the work. They build everything that the product management team lays out and what the designers design. And all 3 of those groups come together, and that's when beautiful product is made. Within management, I did conceptually roll in marketing. Now that could be, depending on, again, the type of company you have, that could be considered a separate entity, and there are pros and cons to that. So as a product manager, I kind of wanted to just give you guys an idea of what I use on a day-to-day basis. whether or not you're familiar with all these aspects, it's okay. And there are tons of different options for all these aspects, but it touches on everything that I find very valuable. So my phone and my computer, I carry them around everywhere. They just keep all of my information at all times available to me. My task manager, I've used a bunch of things that pretty much everything from Evernote to Trello. Over the years, I can't even remember all of them, but I've found that Workflowy is the best for me. It is unstructured and it's just bullet points, and you can make it whatever you want, and it's pretty great. Email, Sparrow and Apple Mail, and then I have my notebook with me at all times just for the quick notes that I need to write down in between meetings or with the conversations that happen with people just randomly during lunch. There's a lot of information flying around, and you need to be the one that captures all of that, and so you can digest it later and work it into your roadmap, whether it's a good idea or a defect that you hear about just through conversation. Analytics is a really big one. Adobe has a really nice analytics suite. They bought a company called Omniture, and we use that at Expedia very, very much. It's wonderful. AdX helps with download attribution, understanding what your efficiency rate is in your marketing across Facebook or email or any type of marketing across the internet. iTunes Connect gives you an idea from the iOS side and Google Play what the downloads look like across the countries, across the different points of sale, and you can watch that trend. It's really nice. So then there's design, whatever works best for the design team. We use Sketch, Photoshop, and iPhoto. I mention iPhoto because there's the iCloud component that lets the designers send their mocks directly into a shared folder or a shared file, and that gets sent to everybody that's watching that file. That gets sent to their iPhone, to their iPad, to their computer, and it gets a really, really clean, fast way of getting those designs into people's hands for review. File management, Dropbox, and development is GitHub. GitHub is amazing. It ties things together very nicely. You can track everything from the beginning of a concept into design, into iteration, into issues, and into the code. And you can track everything through GitHub, and it's really, really great. So the communication aspect is incredibly important, as I mentioned, and these are a bunch of the different teams that I have to work with on a daily basis at Expedia. We do have a worldwide team stationed all across the globe, all across the US, and for every single launch or every single feature, we need to make sure that everybody is on board with what you're rolling out. And that's really important as a product manager, being able to communicate clearly to the leadership team what you're planning to build and have them understand fully. So when the CEO goes and has a press conference, he or she can talk about clearly what's in your roadmap. The development team, that's a pretty clear one. You need to have a constant communication with them at all times as they're doing their work and as they're building out the next release. Design, quality control, testing is hugely important. The more countries and the more points of sale you're in, the more important that is. Translation is huge, and I'll get to that at some point today. I'm not sure when, but translation is huge, and the quality control, the testers are the last line before it goes live to make sure that the functionality works and it works across every language. There's the marketing team. They are the evangelist of what you build. People don't hear about what you build unless they tell them about it. It's hugely important, and it gets getting the marketing team on board and understanding for all the different countries is it's confusing. It can take a lot of work, but it's worth it because you get the same story across every different country, across every different language, and that consistency is very, very powerful. There's the legal team. For Expedia, we have flights and we have hotels and we have a bunch of other products. But for flights, we have regulations, we have taxes, and all of those vary depending on what country you're in. And all of those aspects need to go through the legal team. You need to make sure that everything is according to spec, is according to the regulations of that country, and that can change a lot depending on where you are, what country you operate in. And the hotels aspect, the taxes for hotels vary widely. You might have to consider if you're a legal entity in that country, who processes the payments. All of those things are handled through legal. One specific example of working with the legal team that I'm dealing with right now is a new feature. You need to name that feature. You need to make sure that the branding is not overlapping on any other existing branding, on trademarks, copyrights. So there's a lot of back and forth with the legal team on the ideas that you want to name it, and then they say, no, you can't do that, or yeah, that's okay, but you might need to be aware of this copyright that exists. At Expedia, we have two different groups of customer service. One is the user happiness team, and one is the customer support team. And the user happiness team is essentially our app support. So we've been able to split those out, and it's been really helpful for us to do that. Having one group focus specifically on people getting the information that they need in the app and debugging different issues that users are seeing. And then the customer service team is anything Expedia related. So if you purchase something on the app and it doesn't come through properly, or for some reason the flight is incorrect. And then there's the translation team, and this is a huge aspect for having a global product. Working with them very closely is hugely important. There are a lot of nuances with translations that don't come through in the initial initial translations, and having an understanding of that and hearing from people that speak that language natively is very, very important, because you might have a renovation notice, for instance, that is a little too aggressive, and that could change conversion just slightly. And if you have a worldwide app that has 70 million users every year, that small conversion factor makes a really big difference. So those little differences are really what make that optimization complete. And the translation team really helps with those aspects. So now I want to shift it up a little bit and talk about product design. So in my past, before product management, I was a consultant, and I focused on user experience design, on interface design. And by doing that, going through all of those experiences, I learned that a good product for mobile does one thing, and it does one thing very well. You need to be crisp, and it needs to be as minimal as possible. If you make your app confusing, people won't understand what to do. And if they don't understand what to do, then they won't get the use that you want out of your app. So you need to make sure that you have as close to one good thing as possible. I know it's tempting as a product manager or as a founder or as someone that's trying to launch an idea to roll everything into one launch, or to just get so much functionality in there that you can't if you roll too much functionality in, then people get confused, and that's when you have the breakdown of the experience. So I've broken it into 4 different layers, the good product design.
And it all starts with the user experience. So that this top-down approach to product design is the way that I think of it, and how I have gone about in my consulting, and now as a product manager at Expedia working with the design team. But it all starts with the user experience. You need to understand what the app should accomplish, and you need to make sure that every step of the way, the buttons take the user through the appropriate flow, and there are no gaps. I have interface here last. That is the layer that users see first, and you need to design that last. And I'd like to just lay out each layer so you understand why that is the last thing. But if you let it be the first thing, then you won't catch the gaps, and you will have a just disjointed user experience or a disjointed user flow that will make it a little make things too confusing to use. So the second layer is the information layer. There's the information design. And every app has information, whether it's a photo sharing app or a hotel booking app. It doesn't matter. The content's different, but you still design information in a specific way that is relative to that app. And information, you lay it out. It could be wireframes. It could be all black and white with grayscale. But you need to define where information should be and what you want to convey, so you can get that visual hierarchy and help guide the user through the display of that data. Then there's the interaction design. You've got one screen and another screen, and you need to tie the two together in as a seamless way as possible. And that interaction design is what comes in here. So a lot of times you can think of an app as fluid as you want it to be. It could be all moving buttons. It could be things bouncing around based off of the physics from the accelerometer, for instance. And the interaction design is what ties all of that information together in an understanding, in a user experience that's easy to understand. Then last is the interface. This is, like I said, it's the aesthetic of the app. It is the colors and the mood. It sets the tone. It sets the feel for what users experience when they open your app. It can be lighthearted. It could be very dry and informational. That doesn't matter. What matters is that you have a separate layer for your interface that is ironed out after everything else is defined. And when you have that, you'll be able to narrow down and optimize that interface. You can do cohort testing. You can do A/B test if you want to, and find the right color if you really want to go that far. But having the interface layer being the last one that you focus on is incredibly important. So there are a few different types of product management, and this is something that I didn't really understand when I first started in the app development world. But every different type of product manager has the same components, but you have to handle things a different way. You have to the lifestyle, as it were, is a little different for each type. So there's the startup product manager, which is probably what you guys are all focused on right now. And I kind of think of it as 3 different phases as well. There's the launch stage and the growth stage and the scale stage. Launch is defining your MVP. It's getting that concept and launching it, getting it to market. And that minimum viable product is the most basic form. It performs the essential functionality and nothing else. You need to find product market fit, and you need to find it as quickly as possible, because if you're a startup, you have very finite resources, and you will be amazed at how quickly you burn through money and how quickly you burn through time. So finding that product market fit is incredibly important in the launch phase. Then growth is when you have started to figure out your product market fit and you're starting to onboard users. There's a little more optimization going on. You might have hit your primary target market and you're trying to expand a little bit more. And that's the second phase. Then the third would be scale. You've found product market fit, you've gotten saturation in the demographics that you're trying to hit, and you're trying to get into different countries or different regions depending on what kind of mobile app you have. If it's a city-based one, it could be scaling to different cities. All of those aspects require different mindsets, and being able to understand that as a product manager is really important. Then there's the corporate product manager, which is kind of the hat that I'm wearing right now. It handles conversations with all of those teams that I mentioned before on pretty much a regular basis. In a startup, everything should still get talked about from all those different teams, but a lot of times they happen between 2 to 6 people at launch. And then in the growth phase, it might be 10 to 15 people. And then when you're in corporate phase, at the corporate level of product management, you have these different teams that are spread all across the world. And rather than one point of contact, you have 7 or 8 points of contact for each group. Being able to juggle all of those components is really important. And that's why I pretty much have note-taking things on my phone, on my notebook, on my computer. Being able to juggle all of those and decompose them is time-consuming. Then there's the last type of product management, which I rolled into one, which is consultant and advisor. And I put them together because they help. This type of product management helps the founder or helps the actual startup achieve what they want to achieve. So you can come in as a consultant product manager and give as much advice as you want, but you need to understand that it's not, at the end of the day, it's not your product. You can own it temporarily, but it's someone else's idea, and you need to be cognizant of that. Same goes for advising. You can give it as much advice as possible, but you need to understand that there's advice as a advisor for product that you just need to be cognizant of the fact that it's someone else's pride and joy. Okay, so now I'd like to talk about the product fundamentals. I've broken it up into 4 different concepts, and they're pretty chunky. So if you guys have questions, we're going to have a pretty good Q&A section after this. Feel free to interrupt me or ask me down the road or ask me an email or through Twitter. But there's a lot of information up here, and this will be the meat of today's talk. But the fundamentals of creating a good mobile app are create a useful product, create a smart product, successful and profitable product. For useful, kind of goes into the design aspect, but you want to research, you want to plan, design, build, and iterate for product market fit. And I'll go through the rest individually. So when creating a useful product, you need to identify an unmet need. What that means is, as a user or as a person, you see something or you hear of something, you hear of an opportunity, or you feel this pain point in your life, you need to identify that and create something to fill that gap. A lot of times as an entrepreneur, you'll hear people ask, why are you trying to start a company? Why are you an entrepreneur? Why don't you just work at a big company and work on another product? As an entrepreneur, you have there's a burning desire to fill some sort of gap. You see an opportunity, and you just need to launch. You need to create something that can fit that. And a lot of people consider that a mismatching problem. There's one set of people that want to do something, and they can't do it, so there's a mismatch. So you build a product that can bridge that gap and allow them to perform the task that they want. A good example of this would be Instagram. We talked about it a little bit in the keynote, but Instagram, it found an opportunity to quickly and beautifully share images in a way that hadn't been done before, and people recognized that instantly, and it took off like that. So they found an unmet need, they found that mismatch, and they built an app that fit that gap. And through doing market research and planning and designing. So the market research aspect, I had office hours earlier, and I started to talk about interviewing potential customers. If you have an idea, the most valuable thing you can do before you start any type of development is talk to potential customers. Talk to people that you think want to use your app, want to use your functionality. You might have assumptions, you might have a different mindset or a different way of doing things, and the more that you talk to people before you do any building, the better it is for you. So that market research is incredibly important. Then there's the other type of research where just understanding what's out on the market at the time. Watching other companies is a really good way, just seeing what they're thinking and understanding what they're doing and the approach they're taking and how you might be a little different, or what your strengths might be that would be complementary to their weaknesses. The prototype phase, once you've done your market research and you've laid out your plan, you can start to prototype. You can very quickly iterate and build low-cost versions of what you plan to build and go back to your customers or do user testing. And once you get that prototype built, you'll really test those assumptions and the hypothesis that you've created and see if it's the right thing and see what needs to change. Once you've got the prototype, you can actually start to build something. You've gotten that validation that you're on the right track, and you can put the resources in to building the app. And then once you've built it, test and learn. This is incredibly important, and understanding that you have a hypothesis and you need to test the hypothesis. And the best way to do that is through groups, through cohort testing, through A/B testing. And at the end of the day, you might think that a button should be green, or you might think that account creation should be 3 steps. But sometimes account creation should be 2 steps, or sometimes it should be 5 steps. There was an instance where Twitter was having an issue with onboarding, and they did A/B testing, and they found that breaking up their onboarding process into more steps was actually more effective than less steps. And I think, I don't remember if they published why that was, but I remember that process when it was fewer steps, and I felt there was a lot of information overload. So there are a lot of things that you just might not think of, and when you get into A/B testing and the test and learn process, you can really, really nail those down into individual things and optimize them going forward. Okay, so research, we kind of talked about this a little bit already, but watching new companies, following emergent technologies, understanding trends that are happening, whether it's trends in the mindset of people that you live near, or trends that what's becoming popular. Overall, listening to your consumer, listening to what people want, what people like, what people need, what people hate. A lot of times that speaks more than anything. Finding that pain point is the best way to build an app that fixes it. The first thing that comes to mind for a frustration is the Uber use case. In San Francisco, it was so I live in San Francisco, by the way, and it was incredibly frustrating to find a cab anywhere, and there weren't enough to go around. So Uber got created, and then it caught on like wildfire because everybody needed a ride. People in San Francisco and New York City don't have cars, and they need rides too. So that frustration point, Uber really found a perfect use case of a frustrating gap in the market, and they nailed it. So then there's the planning phase. I've spoken about this a little bit already, but you identify the opportunity, which is that matching problem that I spoke about. You define your thesis, which is based off of the observation that you've built from the real world, and you define your thesis, and then from that you can build a vision off of it. As a product manager, you have the opportunity to be, if you're launching an app for the first time, you have the opportunity to many times be at all of these different stages and influence all of them. So setting the vision as a product manager, you need to understand that the MVP is very different than what you might want people to be able to do 2 years down the road or 6 months down the road. There's going to take a little bit of time for users to understand your product. And that MVP aspect is really helpful in breaking it down so the user education is presented in a digestible way. Then building a roadmap. Once you've got the vision and the strategy and the thesis, building that roadmap and breaking it into MVP and then what comes next. And a lot of times, more times than not, what comes next will change based off of what you learn after you launch your MVP. I would be incredibly surprised if you built an MVP, launched it, and then you were spot on and nothing had to change in your roadmap after that. A lot of times everything changes. And then once you have your MVP and you've broken out your roadmap, planning out your sprints. This is the part that you work directly with engineering on, and they should be informing all of these other steps as well. But planning out the sprints, you get estimates from the engineering team. You get an understanding of how intricate or how time-consuming specific functionality or one piece of functionality would be, and then you can change according to that. So the design aspect, I found this quote from Steve Jobs that I think really hits the nail on the head. But design is a funny word. Some people think design means how it looks, but of course, if you dig deeper, it's really about how it works. That couldn't be more right, you know. It goes back to the different layers and the way that you break up the experience based off of interaction and interface and user experience and information, and then the interface at the end. The more you dig into an app, the more that you understand it's how much work you can do and how easy it can be to throw in too many buttons or throw in too much functionality that can confuse the user. And as a product manager and a design-focused product manager, being able to narrow that down and distill it and clean everything out except for the essential pieces of functionality is incredibly important. So when you're designing an app or when you are working on the concept, a lot of the design aspects or the product management aspects is, what if you could do this? Or what if I had an app that could do this for me? And it's a very lofty mindset, but it's really important when you first start out because you're dealing with ideas. You're dealing with all these different things that don't exist, and that's okay. But you need to kind of time box that a little bit. It's easy to to get stuck in the clouds, and there's a time and a place for it. But at a certain point, like I said before, the product manager ships. And you break down the concept into the vision and the strategy and the roadmap and the sprints, and you get out of that the lofty mindset of what if you could. But it's really important to start there because you're building something that doesn't exist yet. And it's okay to think big. It's okay to think about something that is completely ridiculous and ambitious, and most people might think that you're crazy for trying to do something. That's okay. Thinking big as a product manager, that's part of your role. You need to try to achieve things that other people haven't achieved yet. And being the CEO of the product is one of those components, is driving that process and driving the company into a position that wasn't possible before, didn't exist before. So for design, you want to accomplish the desired outcome, but you want to do it gracefully, you want to do it in a way that is understandable for the user, and you want to do it in as most minimal as possible. For a mobile app, the most important thing you can do is, like I said, do one thing and do one thing very, very well. You can have a huge back end, you can have a very complex system, but mobile apps are inherently intended to, they're best built with single use cases. And I'll get to trends of software products down the road, but things that right now mobile apps are going from multi-use and they're splitting up, and you'll notice that happening more and more frequently. I think I already talked about all the dreaming aspect, the anecdotes, frustrations, market research. So now let's get to the building. The building is, there's a lot here. This is a huge process, and the product manager has a direct role in every step of the process. They work with the engineering team every step of the way, with the design team every step of the way, the marketing team every step of the way. And it all starts with defining the technical requirements. Once you've got the strategy and the vision and the roadmap and the sprints set, the engineers need to know what they're building. They need to understand the requirements that they have to do what they need to do. And you only get those technical requirements from talking to the engineering team. And if you're in multiple countries, like I mentioned before, every single country might have different requirements. And the way that you build something should be directly informed by what those requirements are across the world, or across every point of sale, or across wherever you plan to be in the future, because that might change the entire system architecture or the app architecture on how you present specific information. And the engineers, again, need to know what those requirements are for each country, because it might change the way that they want to build the app, that they want to architecture that back end. Then you need to get the translations. That doesn't necessarily need to happen immediately right then, but as you're getting the country requirements, it's helpful to just get the translations as early as possible, so you can get feedback. You have more time to get feedback from every different language that you're working with. And then we get into design world a little bit, setting the user experience, the navigation, the interaction, the interface, getting all those layers defined so the developers can go in and they understand what you're trying to build, and they can put a mock or put a design to the stories that you're talking about. Being able to piece the two together are the first time that the engineers will see the designs and the designers will see the stories that you're writing. Once that happens, then you start to isolate the designs. So you work with a designer or a production manager or a production designer that can go in. Every app has elements that are images that look like whatever you need to accomplish in the design aspect. They're saved elements, they're saved images, they are pixel perfect designs that need to be distributed to every single team so those teams understand what they're doing. So the isolation of the elements is helpful for the engineering team to build what they need to build. There's nothing more frustrating than an engineer picking up a story that you've written out, and they do work. They start to write the code, and then they need elements of a button or of an image, and then they have to go to the designers, and then the designer has to look at the story and make sure that everything that they understand everything, and then they have to create the design. And there's a lot of churn there, and you can just go straight from the beginning and isolate those elements right when you create the story, and the engineer can just pick it up and build it right then. There's the API and there's the backend component. Every single app has a server-side element that provides the data, provides the information that the app then pulls and then displays as you've defined, and that the APIs that are created, those are engineers too, and they need time to get feedback from the client-side developers, from the designers, from the product managers. So the information starts on the API team, and the more time that they have to get feedback for changing the endpoints as needed or providing more information as needed, it's very, very important. So then you start to do the client development work. The app developers, iOS, Android, start to pick up the stories that you've written out, that you've defined their requirements, you've given them the APIs, you've given them the assets of the designs. They pick all of that up in a story that you've written on GitHub, for instance, or anywhere else, and they start to do the work. These are generally broken up into sprints, and there's a lot of feedback process in here, a lot of communication between multiple engineers, and then the product management, and then the designer, the designer that worked on that story. And once you start to work on the client-side development, starting as early as possible with quality control will save you so much time and frustration down the road. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a team as a consultant, and they save the testing until the very end, and they find this massive bug that forces an entire refactor of the code that they've written, and it pushes the launch date back weeks or months. The sooner you start on testing, the sooner you find issues like that, and the smaller the issues become. So that continuous quality control, you find those defect fixes earlier, and you can fix them right then. And at the end, when you have finished everything, you don't have this massive testing and these massive bugs that you have to go through and just change a bunch of stuff. It results in a ton of churn and frustration, and it pushes back your launch date no matter what. So the test and learn process is a component of product management that helps you disengage a little bit as a passionate founder or someone that's launching their vision. It lets you test your assumptions, test your hypotheses, and see if they're actually valid. So you've observed a pattern, you've developed your theory, you've built your hypothesis, and now you want to measure. You want to understand if what you have built is actually what your user wants to use. So you can do that in groups, and you can do that, and by doing that, you learn through the data. You watch what they're doing through the usage, and also if you can watch what they're doing literally through user testing, like using the product, that's really informative as well. So this test and learn concept, there is somebody named Eric Ries, and he wrote a book called The Lean Startup. He started this movement. I strongly encourage you to read this book. It's a quick read, and it's very, very entertaining. But it gives you an idea of the right ways to go about the test and learn process. He looked at the manufacturing process of the automotive industry, and he found parallels in software development the insights that he gained from that allowed a tighter feedback loop. And using different cohorts, different A/B testing, he's been able to create this idea, code, data loop. And there are a bunch of different aspects. I'm not going to go into all of them now, but I strongly encourage you guys to read at least this slide down the road, but if you can read the book, that would be even better. But it's broken up into build, measure, and learn. Once you build something, then you watch through cohort analysis, through user testing, through A/B testing. You watch how people are using it and using your product, and then you learn through that. And that learning can inform what the ideas are that you have down the road. And then it's just a positive feedback loop all around. Okay, so that is the end of day one. I'd love to hear any questions.
So I just thought it'd be fun, I've known Noah for a long time. He used to be a designer and he became a product manager. Product is one of my biggest passions. When Walmart last acquired my company, and I was doing my 1 year term with Walmart, I was a product manager as well. So that's why I'm here to talk about, to answer your questions about product management, which is, I know in Malaysia, it's a relatively new culture or title. So it's quite fun actually, to get a show of the crowd. How many of you are founders? You have a company, so you have a startup. Okay, so maybe about a third of the room. And how many of you are thinking about a startup or want to start a company? Okay. Then the rest are, you are employees at a startup or you philosophers? Okay, so all the people here then, how many of you are product managers? Okay, that's not bad, maybe like 10 people. How many of you are designers? UX, UI, graphic, okay. How many of you are engineers? Just a couple, okay. What else? How many of you are business people? Okay, the business people. Marketing.
Okay.
The business people are listening for marketing. Okay. So product management in a way, I think this is the first part of the talk. Even in the US is a relatively new term, right? So who become product managers? And usually a lot of VCs and in the Valley say that the best CEOs are usually product people. Not business people, not marketing people. There can be, but because as a founder and starting a company, a lot of it is about your product and product vision, right? So product starts from what is your minimum viable product, or what's the minimum beautiful product, and you define what is that one or two feature that will make your value proposition great. And then you start with that one or two features. So it's a very small scale thing, up to the way, to the vision of the product, what your product can be in the future. And this is where, as a CEO, you not only need to tell them the traction in your minimum viable product now, but you also have to sell what your product can be in the future. And that's why they like product-focused CEOs. And that's why I think this is one of the most important roles at a startup, apart from engineers and designers and marketing people. And usually, business people, or marketing people, or UX people can very easily become product people. Even technical engineers can become product people. So there are two kinds of product people. One is more business product people, and then the other one is more technical product people, right? So the technical product people are usually the product people who work very closely with the engineers and estimate all the user stories, all the requirements, and translate that into technical terms so that when your engineers build your product, they understand fully what all the requirements are, and they can estimate, okay, this feature takes me 2 hours, this feature takes me 8 hours, and they know how to tell you, okay, they know a product manager, they can inform you, and as a product manager, you do trade-offs. I think if you ask me two things what a product manager does is you do prioritization, which means you trade off between one feature to the other feature using data, right? So the number two job is then data-driven decisions. How do you test? How do you make decisions based on the data that you learn from your product, from launching your product? Right? So you make trade-offs. Okay, you work with the engineer. If the engineer says that, okay, Cheryl, this feature, if you want this feature, it will take 3 days to build it. But there's a hack. If you want it to be a quick way, you can build, you can build these two smaller features, and it will take 1 day. And then as a product manager, I get the input from the engineer, and I then use my product knowledge and talk to the business people about their requirements and figure out, okay, which decision to make. So that's kind of like how it is as a product manager. So anyway, that's just a little bit from my perspective of product. I mean, there's so much in the world of product, all the way from sort of the UX part, experimenting, not experimenting, but doing user research, all the way to testing, A/B testing your features when you've launched your product. So there's just a lot. I mean, product covers the whole wide spectrum. And that's why product people have to be multi-talented. And my background was that I'm a consultant, and management consultants are meant to be the jack of all trade, right? So we dabble on many different things. So I find that if you do have a management consulting background, actually you make the perfect product people, because you can interface with customers, you can also interface with engineers, and you can do the whole spectrum of things, and you multitask, right? So I think product people have to be a very good multitasker, very good communicators, and very good all-rounders. Okay, so any questions for Noah and I? We're open to any specific product questions.
Yep. Do we have a mic that people can use? Okay, so a question in the back.
Hello. Right. Just like to get your perspective as the product manager, to you and Cheryl, that would you say that there are multiple perspectives to what a value of a product is? Like, for example, I would say that Asians generally prefer multi-featured products. I mean, to them, this is perceived as better value, as contrast to what I would say the Western perspective, where it's all about minimalism, keep it to 1 to 2 core features. A great comparison would be between WeChat and WhatsApp. So any thoughts on that?
I think one thing you'll notice is that the value that, so you're asking what is valuable for East and West and multi-app. Yeah. I think one thing worth mentioning is in the U.S. there still are. There's a trending. It started with multi-functionality, and it's moving towards single-use apps. So there may be something like that happening at some point over here too, but that trend may not happen forever or for a few years. You may be able to speak to this because you've had more exposure.
I think it's universal. A product is a product. It's universal. There's no such thing as Asian people preferring more cluttered pages, right? Maybe it is a learning curve, but as an entrepreneur, you are supposed to lead the path, right? And the thing about cluttered pages and building many features, or building many features will cause cluttered pages, is that you become unfocused. So in today's world, I'm talking about today, like 2014, there's so many products out there, and so many people, it's so easy for you to launch a website. So if your product is so confusing and not focused, you're going to lose your customers. 10 years ago, maybe okay. So this is the story of Yahoo when they first started, like, I mean, I don't know, like 20 years ago or whatever, right? At first they had maybe like a few features. They were a news site. And then they decided, oh, let's do sports. And then they slap on a sports tab. And then, oh, let's do like stock market. And they slap on stock market finance. And then, oh, let's do entertainment. So they kept adding tabs, Yahoo, right? And that's why their users went down, because they thought, oh, let's add more revenues. Let's get more ad dollars in. Let's just slap tabs. And Yahoo is the classic example in the US. They always say of how as you grow into a bigger company, you think that adding more features is good for your business, but actually it showed that their users went down and it was very low, right? Because their page became too cluttered. And so I think it is just a matter of like distilling down to what people look for these days. People look for simplicity. Same things can be said for Apple. Why is Apple products on the rise? I see a lot of Apple users here because Apple really led the path in a very simple, minimalistic design. And it's not a US thing, it's around the world. Why is China copying iPhone 6 and all that, right? And the one button feature is you don't have anything else to press. So they always say Android is for more sophisticated users because there's too many buttons to press. But the reason why Apple got market share was because they make it so easy that you don't have to think about what to do. You just press one button, and it's very intuitive, right? So always think about it that way. If your product is so confusing and you have too many features on there, there is no clear call to action. So this is a very important key lesson. What is the clear call to action? So when I go to the web page, and there's something to ask me to sign in, and then there's something that asks me to buy, and then there's something that asks me to read more, and there's something that asks me to follow me on Twitter. And they all have the same weightage. They all have the same hierarchy. So if you do your Google Analytics, you'll see that your users are all split, right? But product these days should be very focused. If I'm a new user, you recognize I've never been to your site, I'm not signed in, then the first thing you want me to do is maybe to sign in, right? Then you make the sign in button bigger. But actually that's not good, because why would you ask me to sign in if I don't know your product? I don't know what you're selling to me, and then you ask me to sign in. Again, like the earlier keynote, give before you ask, right? Same thing about your product. So before I see the classic mistake that everybody make on product is that the first screen is sign in, give me your password, sign up. Not sign in, sign up. Give me your information. And you don't let me see what's inside before I sign up. This is the classic mistake that everybody should remove. You give them information first. So it should not be sign up, sign in. It should be explore the product, or like, what is this about? What value can you give the user? And then once they see that, then you make the sign in button more obvious. So there's a lot of ways where you can design your product in a flow that makes sense. Again, empathy is a big thing in product, right? So a lot of psychologists, I love to hire psychologists to be product managers. Why? Because psychologists put themselves in your shoes, right? Or they have a very empathetic personality, and you have to do that as a product manager. So you don't just say, oh, what do I want to sell the customer? Or what do I want to sell the customer? You put them in their shoes. Okay, if I'm the user and I come to this site and I don't know anything about it, I'm just going to bounce, right? I'm too confused, I'm going to bounce. So how can you design a product that is so focused, and when I come to the site, within 3 seconds, I know what to do? Because if you don't manage to capture the value, and I don't see the value, you're losing me. You're going to lose me, because I have 100 other sites to explore, so many ads coming at me. My attention span is very short. So Noah's class today is really about mobile product management, right? And I brought him to speak to you guys because mobile is very different from web, fundamentally. How many of you guys are web people? And how many are mobile people? So it's quite split. So at Walmart, when my company was acquired, it was the right timing. The reason why my company was acquired was because Walmart was redesigning their entire site, back end, and front end. I tell you, if they were not doing that at that time, my company would have not been acquired. So a lot of these acquisitions that happen in the Valley, in a way, you have to be in the right time for it to happen. So in a way, I have a lot to thank for being lucky, for being in the right place at the right time. If I wasn't there at the right time, then I might not have sold my company. So because they were doing this major redesign, I came in and I had to bake in my product into the new website. And it was very interesting. They took a mobile-first approach to designing the website. Mobile design for website. So what that means is, and when we say mobile, they design for iPad first. And I think, your product is also an iPad and mobile, right?
Yeah, we have mobile
You
and
should actually
iPad.
show them some of the screens later. But while he's bringing that up, so when we first started our design process, it's very cool because I got involved from the very beginning, redesigning the whole stores and coupons page. We decided to go with iPad first design because the iPad has a limited screen and you cannot put too many tabs in there, and you have to think like a mobile. Okay, mobile should be very easy and very focused, right? So you open your mobile app, you know number one to do what, and then you swipe your screen or you click this or that. It's never like 10 options. It's always like very limited options. And it's very clear. So it forces all our product designers, UX people to think in such a way. And then once you get the iPad flow right, then from there you minimize to mobile. So even smaller screens. So of course it's responsive design, but then there are learnings to be made. And then from the iPad, then you build for web, right? For example, what was it? On the iPad interface, perhaps you hide some of the navigation, and then you can click to make the navigation come out. But then from there, on the website, you leave the navigation up because web, you have more real estate, so you can afford to put more tabs up front. But it's very easily to translate, right, from iPad to web and from iPad to mobile. So actually it was a very, very good strategy, and I could see how decluttered the site is. But another interesting part is that we did some testing in e-commerce. So Walmart.com is an e-commerce site. It's competing with Amazon.com. And the reason why Walmart stores created Walmart.com is to compete with Amazon, because Amazon is eating their business, the store business, right? The interesting part, and coming back to the point about being cluttered, for e-commerce specifically, the more cluttered they made the site, the better, higher the sales. For e-commerce specifically, not necessarily for news, not necessarily for, say, like WhatsApp, right? Because for e-commerce, sometimes when people come to the site, they either know what they want to buy, so they go and search directly and they buy the product, or they don't know what to buy and they kind of want to see what's on sale, what's there, and then they discover, right? So when Walmart decided to do the iPad-focused way, we removed a lot of the clutter, and then when we did the testing, the sales actually dropped down, and we were like, oh shoot, I thought we were trying to declutter, right? And then we realized, and we do multiple user testing sessions and talking to customers, we realized that the Walmart customer, who are the lower income group, they want deals, they want sales, so they want to discover all the products on sale. So we decided to, the clutter is very strategic. It's not just anything. The clutter was all about sales and deals on the homepage. So we added more stuff in and then our numbers went back up. So the point of it is that there's always a reason and rationale for everything. So there's no rule, there's no hard and fast rule in product. You always come up with a hypothesis, an assumption. It always starts from that. And then you kind of work to prove it or disprove it, and then you tweak your product, right? So do you want it to be cluttered? Do you want it to be decluttered? There always has to be a strong rationale for that. So I hope that was somewhat useful and clear.
Yeah, and to further that point a little bit, each form factor of phone and tablet, the use cases are completely different for those. And the longer they exist, the more understood those use cases are. So I brought up a short clip of our new Expedia tablet app, and the reason that I did this is because I think we spent a lot of time understanding how people wanted to look at travel and how people wanted to experience booking travel on an iPad and a Android app, tablet app. So with iPads, it's more of a lean back experience, and we wanted to enable that lean back concept and let people look at just different destinations in the form of dreaming or planning, not necessarily purely focused on booking. And we spent a lot of time thinking about what that experience should look like. And I think you'll really understand that once you see the way that it's laid out. So right now, that's the launch screen, and you see one thing to do, one action to take. There is a visual hierarchy here. The first thing you see is the search box, and you can search anywhere in the world, destination, city, point of interest, anything, and it all starts right there. And there are other actions that you can take, but it starts with just exploring, and we really wanted to enable that because it is on an iPad. Then you can go through, and as you're exploring, just find different curated aspects of romantic getaways or just good vacation spots for beaches. So as you go through the experience, you see that right now you're at a destination and you get one set of information for hotels and one set of information for flights. And we wanted you to control what information you're looking at any given time. So you go through and you choose hotels, and then you get the hotel's results, and it gives you the map. And you can go through and just get information on whatever specific hotel you're looking at, and then you can go through the process of booking as simply as possible, and just getting each use case down as tight and the user experience as tight as possible for any step of the booking process. But it all goes back to the form factor. It all goes back to what that app should do on the device that you're building it for. And our experience on the phone is very different from this. The reason is the phone is a more transactional experience. It's more, I mentioned this as lean back. This is more lean forward. It's more directional. You've got a few seconds of time, of attention span, and that's it. Users don't spend a lot of time on their phone. They open your app for a specific reason, and you want to give that information to them in as quickly as possible. I hope that answered your question a little bit.
Portrait?
We do both. We just didn't showcase the portrait view in the video. But always designed for both. And
The other?
that's a good question. It really depends on what kind of app you're building. And also, it depends even more on what device you're building for. So if it's mobile for your phone, maybe landscape isn't the way to do it. We don't have a landscape view for the Expedia app, for instance, on the phone. We do on tablet.
One more question is, how much consideration do you put in the design when you compare it to your competitors? Do you actually take in what your competitors are doing and then do design around that or against that, or?
Understanding what your competitors are doing is very important. You need to know what type of functionality, you need to understand what use case they're trying to build for and solve for. Following that just blindly, I think, is maybe not the best way to go. You need to, as a company, as a product, you need to have your own vision and stick to that vision. If you always just chase what competitors are doing, you won't ever be able to stick to your own vision, and you won't have anything that sets you apart.
One quick thing I wanted to say, I realized is also another thing that we learned or I learned from Walmart is we did a lot of user research, tons and tons of times with the customer, observing behavior, observing how they use different apps. And I know responsive design is very popular now. You design one and then you can just scale from different apps, right? I think at the MVP stage, at the early stages of your startup, yes, you should do that because you're just testing. But then as you move on to a more mature startup, you need to think about what Noah said, where the iPad is a very laid-back experience. So, for example, when I was building the coupon page, or the shopping page for Walmart, we decided that the iPad is, you want to fall down on your couch and you just want to look at pictures, you want to look at things, and then you're saving things, you're favoriting things, you're discovering things, right? But whether or not you're likely to buy is maybe not so high, right? And then once you have your list, because my app was making a shopping list and we find you the best deals and coupons, so you know where to shop. Right? So yes, you kind of discover, you figure out what you want to buy. And then the app is more active. It's a more forward experience, like what he said. Meaning that you're actually going to the supermarket and you're checking off stuff and you're like putting things in your cart, you're scanning it, you're calculating how much you're spending. It's a more active thing because it's with you, it's your personal device. And then what we found that a lot of people were buying on mobile app for very small ticket items. For larger ticket items like a TV or a bed or furniture, the larger the ticket price, the more they were actually wanted to go to the desktop and research, right? So it could be that this travel app where, you just want to save, aspirational, where do I want to go next? And I want to discover, I'm saving things. But making travel plans is a huge commitment and a huge financial commitment. So you kind of maybe have a way of redirecting them back to web. For example, after they save some stuff on your iPad, maybe you send them an email a day later. Hey, we noticed that you saved some stuff. Because on the back end, you know that they're browsing on an iPad. And then you drive them back to email and hopefully to a desktop. And then that's when they compare. They go to other sites and compare vacation packages and whatnot. Because at Walmart, what we discovered is for large ticket purchases, like in the thousands of dollars, the time they spend to research is longer. So from the time they first click on a product to the time they buy could be a few days. Versus if the product is like, I don't know, like a $5 clothing, t-shirt, they will just buy on the phone, right? So that's kind of important to know and learn as well. Very different use cases for very different web and mobile applications. So it's important for you guys to keep that in mind. But again, when you're young, when you're starting out your company, don't think about building out for that first. But as you're building your HTML5 responsive design app to test, you should keep that in mind. And when you observe, when you're looking at customers use your app, then you're taking notes. You're quiet. You do not. Sometimes there's many different kinds of user research. Some are more active. You ask them questions. Some are more observational, like what do they do, and things like that. So just to point that out.
Anybody else?
I'd love to hear from. There's one more.
Yeah. Hi, I was just wondering, as a smaller startup, like when is it typical to bring on a full-time product manager? Is it something where you're really early on, you're like 5 guys in a room and one of them does product? Or is it like later on when you have a few product lines and there's 20 people and then you need a product manager?
It's relative. It depends on the needs of each company, really. Most times, as Cheryl mentioned, the CEO is generally the product-focused person, and whenever the duties of that lead person are starting to get taken away from product, that's when you should start considering bringing somebody else on. There's not really a clear way to say when somebody else should join that's only product-focused, because it's all relative depending on how busy you are, how much you're scaling, if you've found product market fit, if you're trying to build on a new platform, and just how busy everybody is. You might have some good feedback.
I've asked this question before in the US, and what a couple of really successful entrepreneurs have told me is that as a CEO or founder, co-founder, you should be very close to the product until maybe you raise your Series A or even B. And I would argue perhaps until you raise your Series B, because VCs, if you plan to raise VC money, they want to know that you as the founder are very close to the product. You're driving the vision of the company. So if you're very far from the product and you're just hiring someone else to do your product, you're outsourcing your vision. And who is there to look after your product? I mean, I've talked to a few Malaysian entrepreneurs actually, and they told me that, oh, I've launched my product, and I'm now just going to outsource it to somebody in India. And I'm like, no, how can you do that? Because once you launch your product, this is when you really need to be there and dive into it. This is when you release it into the market and you're getting user data back, feedback. This is exactly the time you need to be very close to your product. So similarly, as you raise your angel funding, seed funding, and then you raise your A funding, A means you are, in a way, past validation a bit, you have some users and you want to grow to the next level, right? B is already like, oh, you're at growth stage, you're ready to expand maybe to Indonesia or Singapore or something. So when you're A, this is where it is the most dangerous period for startups, because the drop-off rate, the failure rate is very, very high. Because either you spend the money in the wrong way, you spend too much in the wrong way, or you spend money too little, too conservative. And we talk about growth hacking, we talk about marketing, and growth hacking is just a fancy name for digital marketing, for buying user ads, Google ads, Facebook ads, your SEM, SEO, optimizing all your conversion funnels, making sure that when a user, all the way from when your user comes to your app or your site, all the way to what is the end goal, what do you want them to do? Is it to buy your product, or is it to sign up for something? You must make sure there's no leakage, right? Because if you're in the flow, if it takes 10 steps, maybe it's too long, maybe you want to cut it down to 5 steps. And where is it that's leaking? And you need to fix that. And so it requires a lot of data from the marketing department in terms of Google Analytics and metrics, KISS metrics and whatnot. But that's why when Cesare said this morning, growth hacking is a team effort, right? So once you get that data from your, and then obviously engineers have to implement the tagging and all that, and then your marketing team tracks it and reports to you, the product manager, the CEO, product manager, these things, and the product manager makes the call. So you make the call and you tell the engineers and the marketing team and the design team, hey, the flow is 10 pages to get to conversion. We're leaking in flow number 3, high drop-off rate, and flow number 8. So I would then tell the designer, hey, we need to think about this. We need to redesign this whole flow to minimize conversion. We will tackle on number 3 and number 8 first. And who makes that decision? The product manager makes that decision. So if you outsource that and you're not close to that funnel anymore, you are going to bleed. So this is very important, and I think that's why I think we need to be, I think especially Malaysian entrepreneurs, we need to be more product focused and think about those things. And product is a team effort, and you are the team leader. So when I was at Walmart Labs, even though it's a giant company, right, but they have labs, which is their innovation arm. So the rest of the org, Walmart.com, because I was transitioning my product into the Walmart.com, coming from Innovation Lab, right? And it was different cultures even within that. So the Walmart.com team was very like siloed. Okay, the product management team reports to the product lead. The engineering team reports to the engineering lead. The design team reports to that. The research team reports to that. You cannot create that in a startup culture. This is if you are like a 1,000-person company, and I'm sure you're seeing some of that in Expedia. Maybe your team is set up differently.
It's a little different. So the Expedia mobile team operates more like a startup. We have the corporate team up in Seattle, in Washington, and then the mobile team is in San Francisco. And the decision was made as a clear decision to keep the mobile team as a separate entity that can operate a little more startup-like, yeah.
And this is a very smart move. And we're seeing a lot of big corporations in the US starting to form their labs innovation team in Silicon Valley and San Francisco. Walmart did the same thing. So So that was the corporate structure, and I was there because I needed to educate them about what my app did. And then I moved to the labs team, and there the culture is that the team, they call it the 2 pizza team. So every team should not be any larger than what 2 pizzas can feed, right? So they call it the 2 pizza team. And the structure there is that there's a team lead, there's engineers, there's designers, they're working as a team. And the product person, Walmart Labs was a bit more technical focused, so the product lead or the team lead is always a technical product manager. I was leading a team. I'm actually more of a business product manager, and then I actually had a co-lead. I co-led my team with a very, very senior VP guy who is more of an engineering, technical product manager, and we had 15 engineers, and we had 10 engineers and 5 design UX people. So it's still, we had the largest team because we were doing personalization as well. A lot of data scientists, engineers. And I would say 15, that was the max. Ideally, the team size should be 10. Otherwise, it's too big. But then again, the team lead is always the product person. And when you go for interviews for product management positions in the Valley, they always ask you, what does product management mean to you? And the answer they love is that you're a mini CEO for your product, right? So Noah is the mini CEO for the Expedia iPad app, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right, and it's incredibly beneficial to be in the Valley, in the Bay Area for that. Just getting the talent, getting to work with everybody that is focused on building the most beautiful experience possible. The Expedia team has the mobile app and the tablet app, and people focused on every aspect from each experiences, each of the 2 experiences.
I'm curious to hear from the existing product managers here in Malaysia. Can some of you kind of tell us what it's like being a product manager? Do people recognize product managers here? Like, what's your experience like? Huh?
Blurred line?
Wait, sorry, cannot hear.
Okay, so I think it's a blurred line because sometimes you have to take on the role as a marketeer, but occasionally you have to fall back and talk to the tech team, on the latest progress, where's the next feature coming out and all that. And you have to go be the community manager as well, talk to your market, just get feedbacks from them, what's the progress and all that. So there's no clear guideline on a specific job scope for a product manager.
As a founder, you're a founder?
Yeah.
Okay, so of course, and I've heard that a lot too, of course as a founder, you have to do multiple things, wear multiple hats. I think what we need to start branding yourself, is you are a product manager. And again, because you need to focus, right? Yes, you are doing multiple things, but understanding that the product manager is like for lack of a better word, magician, who weaves everything together. It is about weaving everything together because you are the visionary, you are the product visionary, you are creating the company and you're tying all the pieces together, right? You are the only one who can do it, but you're doing it because of the product and the product vision. So when you have that thinking, the mindset in mind, you are more focused. Otherwise, because I have a lot of people email me or ask me for advice, Cheryl, I don't know what to focus on. I have to wear multiple hats. I have very limited resources, very little money. I cannot afford to hire someone. How do I prioritize, right? And the answer is that if you wear your product hat, and you're tying everything together, your focus is product and your customers, right? How do you build a product that really serves your customers' needs? And that is your priority. Everything else will fall into place. Everything else is to support the product. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Sorry. So we actually adopt the idea that we have multiple product managers as well. It's a very democratic process when we decide whether we should launch a new feature or not. Because we have the CTO, he would advise us on the technical aspect. We have another partner. He would advise us more on the marketing aspect of the, whether this feature viable or not in terms of market acceptance. So that is how our company roll. I'm not sure about how other
How
company
big
roll.
is your company?
For this particular project, we have about 8 to 10 people, staff, just for this particular app that we're building.
8 to 10, and you have how many product managers?
Essentially, it's the 3 core members, which are product managers.
3 product managers for 8-person team.
Yeah,
What do
so
you think?
it's a very democratic process where the CTO would advise on the technical viability and the implementation. The marketing person would come in with a creative idea on how he foresee the market will roll and how the trend come in and all that.
But that's not a product role. That's just information and data.
Right.
Yes, he would collect, but he would, he would also sort of prompt the product manager / CDO to do more research on his part. Technically, it's very much, a shared role.
Yeah, so of course it's a democratic process. Like as a CEO, you want to get feedback from everybody. You have to, right? But doesn't mean you have 3 product managers.
Correct.
The definite, in a way, the product manager's role is to make decisions, and you cannot have 3 people making decisions.
Right.
Right. In larger companies, perhaps like at Walmart, also we had a product manager in charge of a feature. Like someone will be in charge of some vertical, babies and whatever apparel, and then someone else is in charge of home. This is a large single company. At a small company, there should only be one decision maker. Ultimately, that should be usually the CEO, the largest shareholder, right? But with the input of multiple people. When you have too many product managers, that is not called product management anymore. It becomes there's not really such a thing as, it's not really democracy. Democracy is just a method, right? To get to the means. But somebody, one person, ideally, or 2% at most, have to get data from everybody and then do trade-offs and then make that decision.
Yep. I think that's more or less what we're running on. But I suppose eventually the next progression, the next evolution would be to have one person, specifically making the right decision for the product when we're ready to scale, on our projected milestone and all that. But for now, it's at a stage where we are growing. So we all sit down and brainstorm a lot, and we take a vote sometimes, But yeah, I suppose we do have one person who actually has a slight upper hand in making the decision.
Yeah, it sounds like everybody needs all the components need to be informing the one decision maker.
Yeah.
And it needs to be more clear that is the decision.
Yes, in a way, the guy who holds the money would make the decision at the end of the day, I suppose.
Now, having multiple product managers does make sense. Like the Expedia team, for instance, there are a few product managers. I handle specifically engagement and post-booking itineraries and flights, and somebody else handles desktop parity and hotels. The reason for that is it's a pretty robust product, and we need people focusing on the specific verticals. But at a stage where you're at, you need to have all the groups informing the one person.
Right. Also, bearing in mind in Malaysia, the market is just so new, the industry is so new, and we probably lack the maturity that maybe more seasoned veterans, product managers have, you see. So it's all about sharing resources and combining just to get the things rolling as soon as possible.
I'm curious, do you guys do the agile process?
Yeah, we are quite agile,
Okay, and so you run sprint planning meetings and you use Jira or Pivotal Tracker to do your process, to assign features?
Yeah, we have all those tracking processes done up. We have planning where we have a scheduled milestone on like this date, what we're going to launch. Are we going to launch this new feature at this date or not? And we get our feedbacks. It's all in a pretty slick cycle, actually. It's a bit chaotic, but it's kind of like a controlled chaos environment.
Yeah, that's good. How many teams here actually use that method? Do you guys know what it is? I mean, I would highly recommend to look into some new, like, I guess, what do you call it? Feature tracking tools?
Yeah.
Scrum.
Scrum.
Yeah, but what tools do you use for that? There's Kanban, there's Trello you can use, there's Pivotal Tracker. This is like your product management toolkit. Like we always, what do you guys use?
So we use GitHub and we use a tool called Mingle. Mingle, it's an internal one. Yeah.
Oh, you have
It's like
your
a
own
custom
tool.
built.
Ah.
Yeah.
At
But
one-
we have Trello floating around too. We have a bunch of different things. But it depends on what the preference of the engineering team is. So we have a different process for Android as we do for iOS, just because that's the way we found works best, depending on their preferences.
When I was running my startup, I used Pivotal Tracker, and I loved it. And engineers understood it because they could, then the designers liked it because they could attach their designs. So I, as a product manager, I would write a user story for each feature. As a user, it always starts with, as a user, I will click into the sign up button and I will see a light box pop up. Is it a light box or is it a whole page, right? You need to define what the requirement is, and then the designer will go in and attach that light box. And then after that process, the engineers will take a first look at it and comment about, I think this is a 1-point story or a 2-point story. It takes me 1 hour or 2 hours, however your metric is. And then or he'll give me feedback, Cheryl, I don't think this should be a page. It's just a sign up. It should be a light box. And it would take very quick for me to do it in JavaScript. So I'm like, oh, okay, let me change the design. So there's a lot of iterative feedback, right? And then once we have all the user stories in, then we do our sprint planning meeting on Friday, typically. Some people do it on Monday. And it depends also, you want to do a 1-week sprint or a 2-week sprint. In early stages startups, we find that 1-week sprints is the cadence, because things change so fast. You have too many requirements coming in. When we did the 2-week sprint, things change so much, and engineers hate it when you keep changing on them. You tell them to build this feature, they spend half the time building it, and you're like, hey, no. Priorities changed, like build this other feature. They hate it, right? So we decided to change it to 1-week sprints. And the other thing we decided that a user story should never be more than 4 hours long, half a day. Because if it's longer than that, and some people say maybe 1 day, because if the engineer is taking 1 whole day to build out the user story that you've written, that means you're not breaking it, as a product manager, you're not breaking it, refining it in detail enough. You're losing out on a lot of details, which means you're not thinking through the flow, you're not thinking through the requirement. Right? So say, for example, I can't really give a good example right now, but okay, maybe you come to this page, this discovery page, and you see, and then you see a whole page of, travel ideas, and that's but you're leaving out a lot of detail, and then maybe with the engineer, you're describing to him, oh, you want this, it becomes an 8-point story, like an 8-hour story, a 1-day story. Maybe you're missing out on, when they come here, I want the travel ideas to be sorted by most popular. And then I want to add a filter button to be able to flip and toggle between most popular and most maybe recent. I don't know. This is just something like that. And then you realize that whole page actually, right, you can break it down to multiple smaller stories. For example, the whole sort by most popular is in itself one feature that could actually take the whole day, right? Maybe some algorithm depends, and then you have to put in your algorithm there. How do you define most popular? What is your metric for rating? And then that's why I think sometimes as a product manager, if you don't think down to that detail, right, and you just say, oh, I want this page, and your engineer thought you want something else, and he estimates 8 hours for it. And then when you drill down to the details, right, you find out that, oh, this page actually takes 5 days to build out, which changes the whole thing. That's why in product development, there's always delays. And whose fault is it? It's the product manager's fault. It really is. But it's okay, right? Because in a way, as junior product managers, there's no class for product management except at GA, right? They're starting to teach it. In schools and universities, there's no product management course. This is very new. I mean, web technology and these tech startups have only recently come about in 2008. So it's very new. and we learn, right? So I learned how to be a product manager. Nobody taught me. I learned from Noah. Noah learned from me. And we learned by talking with designers and engineers and best practices, talking to other startup founders. Like I'll go to my friend's office and I'm like, how do you do it? So you guys should all do the same thing, right? Don't just stay within your own setup, but go out and figure out how. I always ask my friends, what do you use Jira? Do you use Pivot Tracker? Why? How do you run your Scrum process? I do it differently. And you learn something new. You learn how to improve that process. Because it's not taught, there's no manual for it. There are best practices you can search online, but you find that out, right? So in the case of that one page, I made so many mistakes doing that, right? As a business person, not technical, I can code front end, but not back end. So when it comes to back end stuff like algorithms and search functions and all that, I had to do trial and error. And when my engineers tell me, Cheryl, this is too big, this is too complicated, tell me what you really want. And I go back and I write 10 stories out of that one story. Then I realize, okay, I need to drill down to a more granular detail because it helps my engineers and it helps me as a product manager plan better when I can deliver the product. And then I go to the marketing people and say, okay, launch date is not January, it has to be March because this is all I want. I make that call to push back the launch date. Or I say, no, this is too complicated. Okay, rather than do algorithm search by popular and newest, let's remove the newest and let's just do one. And then I can cut back 2 days. And then I can launch my product in February. So these are all the decisions that you have to make as a product manager. These are exactly the CEO type decisions that you have to make. And if you are a CEO, you're a founder, you do not understand product down to that level, then you are not a good founder. It's just the reality.
And also being able to break stories down into those very granular components helps you in communication. So you talked about how it's kind of blurred lines. I had a slide that listed every kind of organization, every team that I work with at Expedia. And product management is the overlap of all of those things. And it's all communication. And being able to clearly convey what people are working on and the intricacies of that is very important, and that only comes by breaking every story down into the very specific granular aspects. Because the engineering team will care about one part, but the marketing team will care about another part, and then legal will have other questions. So having all of those different components broken down into the most basic forms will help you, because you need to have it all in your head or in your phone or in your computer or wherever. You need to have it all ready to communicate outward to the other teams.
So the other skill that a good product manager has to have is the ability to do the micro level, drill down, very detail oriented, like an event planner. You have to know the logistics details, right? It's like not easy to plan a huge 5-day event like this. So many details that you have to think about. But also, in a CEO visionary kind of way, you step away from the details. A lot of people get caught in the details. They cannot see the big picture. Then that doesn't make you a good product manager either, right? You can be a assistant product manager maybe, but then a good product manager would be able to step out and look at the whole picture, like Noah said, like marketing, the conflicting opinions. You can step out and be the master weaver, right? And then you also have to then convince people of why you're making that product decision. Again, a very much a founder skill. You're convincing people why your product works, why your product is great. And similarly, you need to convince your team why you're making certain product decisions, because the product decisions you make influences the direction of your company, right? So I always have arguments with my co-founder, because he was an engineer. He was at IBM. Johnny, and he was very technical, very detail-oriented. He always has to question, why? And later I know that he's very data-driven. As a founder, I'm very intuitive, and I talk to so many people. I talk to customers, I talk to investors, I talk to marketing. So I always feel that I'm right in a way. I always feel that I have the broader perspective. And then when I talk to Johnny, he just doesn't understand, he doesn't want to step out and see my perspective. But then I learned, I think it took me like 2 years. It took me 2 years to realize that because engineers are very data-driven, they're very logical. Because if you think as a programmer, as a developer, you have to be very logical and you have to think, how do I debug this? Oh, what if things go wrong? So by default, engineers are unfortunately a bit more pessimistic, a bit more negative, and I always face this kind of problem with engineers. and as founders, you're so visionary, positive, oh, we can do this, we can do that. And then you get like stabbed by your engineer, right? Or your co-founder somehow. So what I've learned actually is that run an experiment. All Johnny wants to see is that I test it. I had an assumption. So I'm like, okay, Johnny, if you don't believe me, let's do a very small split test and run this on 5% of our users. And if our numbers increase by more than 10, okay, just to throw out a number, it doesn't matter what the number is, more than 5% or more than 2%, then let's double down on it and let's deep dive into it. So we started like shaking hands and say, okay, Cheryl, I'll let you, it will cost me half a day to do this experiment, but I'll do it to prove to you that you're wrong, he would tell me. So I'm like, okay, fine, let's do it. And then sometimes I'm wrong, sometimes I'm right, but that our communication with each other improves. So as a team, when you're working with multiple people, you also have to understand as a product manager, because you're working with many different personalities, that sometimes the way you communicate with your technical person, your co-founder, or the very ambitious marketing person is very different. And you need to understand their personality type, right? How they think, and how do you as a product manager or founder convince them that you're making the right product decisions? And if you don't know, admit you don't know, and just say, let's run an experiment, let's test it out. And you can do the same thing with your designer. Maybe she likes a red button, you like a green button, let's test it out. But like Cesari pointed out this morning, there also has to be a why, right? You cannot just say test everything, and then you're wasting your time every time you do a test, half a day. You have to have a strong, valid reason. I want a green button because I think it's a lighter color, or it means positive, yes. Red color means negative. It means alert, like awas, like, perhatian, whatever. My BM sucks. So, you know what I mean? So you have to have that perspective. Okay, I think we should make the button green. And then you have a designer saying, no, I think it should be red. Okay, let's do an A/B test. Or if it's too absurd, then just, if you take a vote on your company and everyone agrees, then maybe you don't even have to move on to the testing phase. Any more questions?
Who else?
Maybe questions from engineers or designers? Can, of course can. Engineers actually make great product managers. Right?
Engineers, like Cheryl said, engineers can be great product managers. It's tempting as an engineer to think about what is easy and what is possible and what you have done before, what you've built before. And if you allow yourself to think within those bounds, think within those boxes, it's tempting to say no. It's tempting to push back and say, it's not worth my time to do this. There are types of kind of meshed technical product managers, if you will, that lead in the more technical perspective. So you work with engineers and you help size tasks, you help size stories, and help the business-focused product manager understand the components of what they're asking for. So the answer is absolutely yes, you can be a product manager. Don't let your understanding of the code and your knowledge of the code hinder you, because writing code is magic. You can, oh man, no pun intended. Writing code is magic. You can do whatever you want, but it's easy to let yourself get caught in a box of what you've done before, and as a product manager, you can't allow yourself to get caught in that box.
We were developers many years back, right?
Okay.
Now things have changed. Even now we don't really go into too much coding also. Coding styles also have changed. So sometimes, we try to use our previous knowledge and say, hey, do it this way, this way, this way. This guy say, how? I mean, things have changed, you know, to some extent. I don't know whether that time we should say, no, you know, engineering side, let it be down and, you know, be the product manager only.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. You, as a product manager, you own the product, and everyone you work with has their specialty. They have their expertise. You need to, a good product manager lets them do their thing. It lets them focus on what they're specifically good at. So engineers giving you that feedback of, oh, what you're telling us to do is outdated, or there are much better ways to do it. That's a good thing. Getting that pushback, getting that feedback means that you need to take a step back and let them do what they do best, which is find new ways to code new stuff.
I have a very good advice for you. My friend, just to answer your previous question, actually Google, they only accept product managers who are technical. So they test you for coding skills first before you can interview for a product manager role. Actually, they offered me a job even though I wasn't technical, but having run a startup for a long time, even if you don't know how to code, you should at least know how to speak the technical terms and the lingo. So I know enough about Ruby and Rails, JavaScript, HTML, Objective-C even, because building a mobile app is very, 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 very different than building a web app. But that's another topic. So you need to at least be able to think like an engineer, understand how the engineering process is, right? So my tip for people who are interested in being good product managers, right? My friend Maria, she's actually going to come here in December and teach mobile UX or product. She's very good. She became a very good consultant in this field, and a lot of the best startups in Silicon Valley actually consult with her. So I asked her, how do you be an expert in the product management field? And she actually told me it's very easy to be an expert, actually. You just need to spend the time, right? So what you do is you do case studies. So you probably have some sort of idea about what problem you want to solve or what company you want to build, but maybe you don't know what is the best user experience, the best product for that. It's okay. Now think about what are your favorite apps? Or what do you think are really good apps out there, web apps or mobile apps, it doesn't matter, right? And this is a very common Marissa Mayer question when she hired at Google and Yahoo. She always asked her associate product managers, because she's a product person at Google, she hired all her APMs, all her associate product managers, and she always asked them, what are your top 3 favorite apps or products to use and why? What do you like about them? What do you not like about them? And there's a reason why she asks these questions. She wants to kind of get into your mind of what products you like to use. But back to Maria, so she just says, dive into, say for example, very easy example, Instagram, Hipstamatic, a competitor, Facebook photos. They all do the same thing, which is allow you to take pictures on your camera, your phone camera, and post it, right? What makes Instagram way better than all the other apps? What is the user experience in it? So she did a case study, and she realized, she found 10 points. Maybe, like, for example, it takes 10 times faster to post a picture on Instagram than on Facebook. Because way back then, it took a long, Facebook had a latency issue for posting photos, because that wasn't their core, again, not the core feature, right? And then filters were much better. It was very easy to use. You get feedback loop right away, because someone can just tap twice to heart it, right? And when the person gets feedback right away, I get digital currency, right? Digital happiness, because, I get excited about it. So there are a lot of things that make a product great, and you list them out. And then there are things that make a product sucks, and you list them out. And if you compare enough products in the same field, you become an expert in product. It's not hard. It's not science. And so when I learned about that concept, actually I learned about it when I was first starting my company. Someone told me, because I asked the same question, how do you be a product manager? Just use a lot of apps. he told me, just use a lot of apps and try different experiences. And then everyone is a user. Everybody has an opinion. You all have your own opinions, and you all have that natural instinct. Why is it easier to use this product than this product? And then maybe when you compare side by side, you just sit down every hour, every day, do your own case studies. Today, I want to talk about travel apps. Let me find all the travel apps. Let me compare. Then tomorrow, I'm going to talk about all the, financial apps, and let's compare. And then maybe one day you find that, oh, this site takes a long time to load. Then this site takes much quicker to load. And that caused me to drop off. Then you now have this perspective and this opinion that loading time is very important for users because that affects your attention span and how likely you want to trust the site, right? If it takes a long time to load, maybe you feel that the engineers or the product managers didn't think about my user experience. They didn't optimize the images. That means my whole user experience from the landing page on will suck. I don't want to waste my time. I'd rather use the same app that loads faster because they thought about my user experience. Then you kind of form that perspective, okay, loading time matters. Sign up button matters. Apps that make me give them their information before they give me information is a bad user experience. Or if, I'm sure all of you have this experience where you sign up using your username and then your password, and then you entered the wrong password or something, sign in using the wrong password, and then they delete everything, and then you have to type everything again, right? And then you're like, I hate forgotten passwords, right? And then you use another app where they keep your username, and you just have to retype in your password. And it's like, okay, I save 2 seconds there, and I'm less frustrated. Little things like that matters, and it can only come into your own experience using multiple apps. So that's one tip that even though you might come from, 10 years ago, or you might think that you're old, from the old school world, it's okay. I think there's so many examples of good user experience apps, good products out there that we can all learn from. I think we're running out of time, so we can only take one last question.
Behind you.
Oh, behind.
Oh, sorry.
What's the best way to do user testings, whether it's web apps or whether it's mobile apps, or whether there's any difference even in terms of how you do user testings? And again, you mentioned earlier about how a lot of times you use intuitions and thoughts that you feel is quite right without having to do A and B split testing and whatnot even. And how does that marriage between user testing and intuition decides what's supposed to happen into a certain product?
You want to handle mobile web and I'll do app?
Sorry?
Do you want to handle mobile web and I'll take the app user testing? Okay, so for app cohort testing or A/B testing, it's a little more expensive in a sense to do. It's still valuable, and we do it at Expedia. We, as an entire organization, we are very A/B test driven, and we go up every month and present what A/B test we've worked on as a product team for every group. So on the native side, we do have an in-house tool that we use, and it's incredibly important to still test on native. It's a little more difficult because you do have the publishing process of getting the app into the App Store and submitting and getting approval for iOS. Android's a little bit easier because it's instantly online. But being able to A/B test on native apps is very important, and laying out what cohort you want to test against and having a control is what the most useful aspect will be.
Do you guys use Flurry to track mobile?
We don't use Flurry. We've looked at it, but we use Adobe Analytics mainly.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So my feedback for that is the same with mobile or web. Okay, it really depends on the stage of your company. At the very beginning, there are two kinds of user testing you can do. User research is what I call it. Even at Walmart, we do this because we're testing out a new concept, a new idea, right? So one way is a more active way, like I mentioned just now. So you have a list of questions, And all you want to do is, it's more like user interviews. You want to ask them questions about their behavior from morning to night, what do you do? And then you're trying to figure out the perspective of how your app or your website fit into their daily lives. Is it a daily thing? Is it a monthly thing? Is it a once a year thing? It depends on your product, right? If it's a daily thing, then where in my whole day, I'm so busy running around and going to meetings, where do I actually open your app and use it? You have to think about that. So as you're interviewing your customers, you have to keep that in mind. And then, because you have to think from before they use your app, when will they actually enter? And when they enter, then you ask them questions about their behavior. Oh, when you go to the supermarket, do you think about, or when you want to go and shop, right? Do you think about making a shopping list? And everyone will say, yeah. Oh, how do you do it? Oh, you actually use a pen and paper. So then you figure out, okay, 30% of my customers right now use pen and paper. Another 50% use my note on my iPhone or Android, and then another 20% uses the Google Doc. So you interview them, you get some data. It could be free, it could just, you can advertise very cheaply and get that data back. Or you can just meet someone at Starbucks or someone who go to Tesco or Giant and interview them and get that data so that you are more, this is before you create your product, right? So there's a lot of user research that happens before. And then when you actually, okay, you have enough data, and then you build your product, your wireframes. And then this is when you have a bit more refined product. So we would go to Starbucks, my team, I make my whole team do this every Friday. We say, hey, do you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes? I will buy you $10. I will buy you a Starbucks cup of coffee if you just talk to me. I'm a startup, I'm creating this new app. I would love to see what you think about it. You ask a few qualifying questions. Do you shop at grocery stores? Do you use coupons? And if they say yes, then I say, okay, you're qualified. If they say no, then I move on. Oh, sorry, you do not qualify as my target market. So once they say yes, right, you give them your iPad. And you tell them, you explain to them, okay, this is a user testing session. I'm going to sit next to you, and I'm going to take notes. If you may, why don't you walk me through out aloud your thinking as you're going through my app. I will not be allowed to ask you any questions until you tell me you're done with it and you're about to exit the app. All right? So you learn so much doing that. I think after one session, we only talked to 5 people. My whole team was like, enough, our app sucks, let's go back and modify it. So because you see, when you give them the iPad, then we tell them, like, okay, assume that this came into an ad, an email, or through a partner affiliation, and then you click into it, and this is what you see next. So we tell them the journey of how they got to your app in the first place, right? Then, okay, they understand that, and then, okay, now you're here. Then I will be silent, and I'll be taking notes. And you need to make them feel comfortable. So they'll tell you, oh, I don't really understand where to click now. Oh, I think here, okay. Oh, all right. And then they'll describe, and they are very good at that. They're very willing to help young entrepreneurs, right? And I tell you, we learn so much. So every week we did that for 10 weeks. We did that for 10 weeks until at the end of 10 weeks, we are pretty confident because your results should improve with sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you make a modification and then it became worse. And you go back to the drawing board. So it took us 10 years just to test on paper prototype. No coding yet. It's all design. It's all piecing up PSD designs. And then at the end, week 10, it could be 6. It can be as long as possible. It should be as long as possible. Because in your whole startup life cycle, this is the cheapest part of your whole journey. Even Spotify uses this process when they want to launch a new feature. They do the same thing because they realize that this is the cheapest part of their development process. So you do that until you get to a very comfortable point. So this is the very initial user testing. What Noah talked about was very later when you have when you've actually built the app, and then you test using data-driven results. Then you test your decisions should be data-driven, right? Because your product will be more mature at that point. So that's just an example. All right, I think we are out of time. Thank you so much, you guys, for coming. And if you have any more questions for Noah or I later, you can ask us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. And I'll be here tomorrow talking about more advanced concepts of the fundamentals and different various product loops and common user patterns that you'll see out in the wild that have been successful. Thank you.
you.